Welcome back to Rocky Unscripted, where we talk about faith when Sunday is over. And I'm joined once again with the great, knowledgeable, and awesome guy, Mitch Comstead. How's it going, Mitch?
Thanks, Nick. And I want to take this moment to actually thank you for being on this podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
A lot of love. Mm-hmm. And we have some very special guests with us today. We have Jori and we have Becky. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. We're talking about Enneagram Type 5 today. And we're continuing this series where we're not just talking about individual types of the Enneagram, but we're dedicating whole episodes to each type and also the subtypes and the instincts that combined with those types make the subtype. I think we talked about this a little bit in our intro, but I do think that's important as far as some of the vocabulary is concerned. So the subtype, you call it a subtype based on what? Can you remind us?
I mean, you just basically said it, but it is the type. So Enneagram Type 5 mixed with one of the three instincts, which could be social, self-pres, or one-to-one. And when you mix one of those three instincts with a type, you get the subtype of the number 5. And so, I think oftentimes we see meme versions of certain numbers and we're like, oh yeah, all 5s are like this or whatever. But that's not true. And that's a part of this is like, God has made us and wired us to be very unique and very different. And this is just another layer of that.
I hope that people have been able to see that as they've been watching or listening to the episodes, because every pair of guests that we've had, of course, there's some similarities, and they'll be talking, the other person will start nodding their head like, yes, I've experienced that. However, they're very different. And maybe the jobs that they have or where life has taken them. So it's been really, really cool for me to see that, and I hope other people have noticed that too. But I'd love to get to know you guys a little bit more. What does family look like, work, hobbies, whatever? Start with you, Jori. What's life look like right now?
Yeah, so I've been married to my husband, Sean, for 6 years. We have 2 girls that are 4 and 2, so they keep us so busy. I work here at Rocky. I oversee our communications department, so marketing, social media, website, all that good stuff. Hobbies. So I just took up a new one. So
really?
My toxic trait is I can look at like almost any hobby or really even career and be like, I could research that enough to do that. And
it's probably true.
Well, a little bit.
But you've reinvented yourself a couple times already career-wise.
That is true. Yeah. I had no background in marketing, communications, any of that, and look at me now. Killing it.
I love the humility.
Yeah. So I recently took up embroidery. I saw a TikTok and I was like, this looks like a really cool thing.
You have to get the machine that
does it? So it's like kind of like cross stitching. So you have the hoop and then the patterns, and I watched 2 hours on how to do all these different stitches, and that's what I do now.
Bada boom, bada bing. You're cross stitching and embroidering.
I think it's the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
Now, my mom, who watches this, she was super into embroidering. So is this the same thing? Is it evolved over time? Is it?
Probably not.
I guess that's a good point. I mean, it's how much can you evolve?
Yeah, maybe there's a few new types of stitches to do, but yeah, it's probably the same. Not
a ton of innovation.
No,
although there's machines now that you can just make this symbol and it just does it for you. That's probably where the innovation.
Yeah.
Right on.
I'm over here doing it by hand.
There you go. A little slower.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks.
Becky, we'd love to know what does life look like right now?
So I'm married to Mitch. We've been married for 20 years.
Hey, finally got Becky on the podcast.
Yes. Guys, this is a monumental moment, really.
How so?
The fact that my Enneagram 5 wife is here today and on a podcast with me is really awesome. And I don't think this is going to be the last time.
Uh-oh.
Well, and I have been hating every minute of thinking about this, and I took a nap in preparation for it. So,
well, you shot me a text and said, we're videoing this? This is new.
Yes, I saw an Enneagram, Shelby.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute, I did not sign up for a video.
You did not.
I did not.
So we didn't tell anybody. The reality was we didn't know that we were going to video these until maybe 3 days before episode 1.
Okay.
So the good news is we've been able to iron out some of the wrinkles. So yeah, you're in good hands. But thanks for being on the show. We didn't have to twist your arm too hard. We asked you. You weren't like, please, interview me.
Yes.
But to your point, Mitch, you were like, hey, if I can help, let's do this.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I interrupted you. You said you're married to Mitch.
Yeah, married. We have 3 girls, 15, 9, and 7. And it's been really interesting kind of seeing probably what some of their numbers are. For work, I'm a dental hygienist. I'm currently just temping 2 days a week. So I'm home all the other days. So that's the harder job. It's easy to go to work. And then hobbies. So I like to garden, cook. I love doing pizza, perfecting my pizza, read.
Now, do you have the same passion for board games as Mitch does?
I am passionate about
episode.
him doing them because that gives me alone time.
There you go. So do you join in when there's like big family game night?
We don't do big family game night usually.
10% of the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
That I'm playing with the kids.
He'll play with the girls. Yeah. And then when we have friends over on occasion, if it's like a couple's friend, I'll join in, but usually it's just guys that he does games with.
So they're playing over there and you can go have conversations or do whatever you want to do with the other people.
She can go read.
Okay.
Or cook.
There's not other people there.
Gotcha.
It's just guys that come over.
I hear you.
Or he's downstairs with the kids.
I think
I'm enjoying alone time.
I remember being a kid and it was like a thunderstorm, rainy day, like power was out, everything. And my mom like blew the dust off this, like the game Clue, this box. I don't know where it came from. And we played like one game and I was like, this is amazing. Why don't we do this more often? We never played again. And we just weren't game people. Card people weren't game. And I think that's probably where it comes from. Or the fact that I don't like to play games now. That's why. My wife will sit down and play games with the kids. And I'm like, like we're explaining the rules again and again and again. It's like, I'm losing my patience. Anyway, sorry, we digress. So today we're talking about Enneagram 5. And I would love to, before we get into the subtypes, go into what it looks like to be a type 5. But I want to throw a curveball. Mitch, typically in the episode we say, Mitch, why don't you give us some of those main points, those ideas, and then we let our guests kind of say, like, does this sound right? Do you have any other questions? I would love to flip that a little bit. I'd love to start with you guys and just tell us what it has been like to be a 5. And I don't know how you'd want to explain that, if it's how you discovered you were 5. Maybe another couple of questions, you can answer any of these, is maybe what are some of the challenges that you've because often that's how we find our type, is we realize what we're struggling with. What challenges are there being a 5? And maybe I'd love to hear like what strengths, like where's that you feel like it's actually helped you. But I'd love to start with you, Jori. I'm putting you on the spot.
So I'll start by saying for the longest time I thought I was a 3, and Mitch probably laughed every time I said that I was a 3 because I'm definitely not. But I think it was like Mitch saying, hey, I think you should go read more about the 5. And so then reading about that, I was like, yes, okay, it makes sense why I love to research stuff. Like I just do these deep dives into things, or like why I enjoy like reading deep theological books or political books. Like, yeah, it like clicked. So it was like, just like my love for just like knowledge, wanting to know more. And then like the other side of that, the challenge being like, oh, that is why I struggle with my like emotions, or like showing emotion, or like in an argument, it's like, no, like let's stay like monotone and like not raise our voices. And
so, okay, if you're in an argument, are you intentionally trying to keep your voice low?
Yes.
Or okay, so that is something that's intentional. It's not like it just happens.
Yeah, no, like it's an intentional thing where it's like, one, I'm uncomfortable with like the heightened emotion of like an argument, but it's also like there's no productivity in that. Like in my mind, it's like, let's just stick to the facts. Let's just hash it out.
Be rational about this.
Yeah, let's be rational about it. Let's be adults about this. And my husband loves that. not at all. And then, but I feel like one of the things that's been like really helpful, so now being a parent with a 4 and a 2-year-old, and I was actually telling Mitch this the other day, is I don't like my own emotions, but I like learning why other people have the emotions that they have or do what they do. And I feel like that's been really helpful as a parent. Like I'm really into like reading parenting blogs, watching TikToks about parenting, reading books about like why my kids do what they do. Like I went down this whole deep dive of my 4-year-old's having these temper tantrums and I can't figure it out, and found out like her brain is growing at rapid speeds and having all these misfires 24/7, and so she can't emotionally regulate herself. And I feel like as a 5, that's helpful, where it's like I can find the logical side of like, okay, I can rationalize like why my children are behaving like this, which is a typical 4-year-old, a typical 2-year-old, and then I can regulate myself to like help them.
Yeah.
Which has been probably the most helpful thing that I've found so far, and like discovering myself as a 5 and being a parent has been that.
So you basically realized that their brains are broken.
Yeah, all the time. And I was like, I'm so sorry that you're just like, it's the end of the world 24/7.
That's funny because I just feel like it's going to keep going in those cycles. Like I remember my sister one time saying, oh, just wait, like when your kids become teenagers. And she said this with a sense of affection. She's like, they get so dumb. And I'm not saying that my kids are dumb, but I can relate to what she said. You know, there's just
Their
those
brains
moments
are
of like,
broken.
why did you do that? Why did you say that? Why did you think that way? Yeah.
It goes through that same cycle,
Yes.
actually, again, when that 11, 12, 13-year-old range. And so they don't know how to regulate themselves. And that's why, you know, sometimes teenagers think they're invincible. And all this stuff. Anyway, this isn't a board game podcast or a brain
We just did
neurology.
a parenting segment. But what's cool, what I'm hearing you say is it's been beneficial for you, that strength and that desire, that pull to research, because something that is really mysterious that could just be overwhelming. You have this ability to dig in and research and find an answer that helps you then apply that to your life. And you're like, life is better now.
Yeah.
I cracked the code, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that feels like exciting. It's like, yes, like I learned this new thing.
Becky, I'm curious, when you started this Enneagram journey, I'd love to dig in and be like, did you start at the same time?
It was close to the same time. I think it came on our radar around the same time. And then we did a test and had a counseling, just like a one-off counseling session, I think, on the Enneagram. And it was interesting because my like top 5 numbers were all very close together. And so
Do you remember what they were?
9 was in there. I remember 2 was my lowest.
Didn't you come out? Didn't we come out of that with your? They were like, you're a 3.
I think 3. Yeah. So I kind of lived with that for a little bit, and then Mitch came home one time, and he's like, "So, I don't think you're a 3. I think you're a 5." And so I started looking at that,
and it crushed you.
It kind of did.
Really?
Well, because I think partly there's almost this admiration, I think, for 3s in our culture.
I agree. I agree.
And so, you know, the 5s. You're kind of like, what is a 5? They research. What is that? And they like to have alone time. Like, we don't sound very kind. So I think there was a little bit of not an identity crisis, but like, okay, let me think about that. But as I learned more, it definitely felt like that rang true to me. And there was a freedom in that. You know, one of the things too with Enneagram 3s is they're very non-emotional, and 5s maybe even more so. And so that definitely rang true. So yeah, 5, I forget what else you said. There was a lot in there.
Well, I'm curious, where have you found it to be, like embracing the fact that you're a 5? Where have you found it to be, this is actually helpful to me, or there's a strength in knowing that I'm a 5? One of the things I think of is you said, I don't know if you're serious or not. It's like, I took a nap, so I'd be ready to be on this episode. Is it even knowing yourself, knowing how to prepare for those environments where it's like, there's gonna be a high demand
I think it kind of is. Thank you for saying that you thought that was a positive.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, how lazy am I? No, there's definitely an awareness of the energy level. I mean, no one will ever accuse our family of being overcommitted to things. And so I think, I don't know, I think that's been good for our family. Just Mitch has time to play games with them. We kind of have a slower pace in our family life, some good rhythms. But yeah, I kind of am always aware of what's coming up that's going to tap into my energy stores.
So when you look at your calendar and it's full for the next couple of weeks,
So
what does that do to you?
oh, yeah, go ahead and answer that.
Oh, it can be very stressful. When even on a day that I'm like, I was running here and there and there and there, it's like I need, as long as I have the next day to do nothing. So yesterday I cleaned my daughter's room, got 2 trash bags out of her room. It's very good and rewarding. Today's like a slow day. I'm not going to do anything. So it's very balanced.
What were you going to say, Mitch?
So, in the heat of we have a basketball program at Rocky. And so during that time, we have kids in basketball and kids in cheer. And then our Jocelyn, our 15-year-old, started a job. And so it was literally something almost every night of the week. Yeah. And, small group and just all these different things. And so with all of that, it was like we knew going into that season that we just need to put our heads down and get through it. And also, we also then took a 3-day vacation, just the two of us after that. Just as another opportunity to recharge the batteries and stuff. So
I think a lot, you mentioned the 3, you said you thought you were 3. At one point I thought I was a 3, and you're right. In our culture, we lift that up because we think a 3 is positive and they accomplish a ton, and they don't get tired, and they just go. And it's like, who doesn't want to be that? And we assume that also is the picture of what a healthy person is. Is they don't get worn out, they don't get overwhelmed, and they just accomplish a ton. And I think another thing, well, let me stay on that idea for a second. Recognizing, okay, I'm not a 3, as disappointing as it may be in the moment, is so much more healthy to recognize who you actually are. Because then one thing we'll talk about in a little bit is these are areas where we can pursue growth. I can't remember what the term that you use. But it's like, these are practices we can take, and that'll only work if you know who you are. Otherwise it's like, that's not going to be helpful to you. I'm curious though, Mitch, in your experience, it seems like it often is the case that if someone's like, they claim a number with like joy. Oh, I'm a 3. Like, I'm a 7. I'm a not whatever. It's like, I don't know if that's what you are, because you're super excited about it. It seems like most people, when they finally identify the type that they are, it's like, oh no, I didn't want to be a 6. I didn't want to be a. Is that the case?
Except for 8s. 8s are proud that they they are 8s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're like, why wouldn't I want to be strong?
Right.
That's a dumb question,
Yeah.
But besides that, I think there is a lot of confusion, and even out there's a lot of not only 3s in our culture, but 8s. There's a lot of 8 envy out there too, of people wishing they were strong. Again, it's to that same point of like, I can just go, and I can get all this stuff done, and I accomplished the tasks and all this stuff. But it's also like, I'm big and I'm strong and I move important things forward. Like, who doesn't want to be that and like stand up for the little guy? And I'm going to do anything it takes, So I think there is some of that as well.
And maybe in our culture, we embrace or we lift up that, like the good side of some of those numbers, 3s and 8s, 7s, let's say. And we minimize the shadow side of those numbers. Because I think there's probably a lot of 8s that are like, oh no, like there are some dark things to my personality. And same with other numbers. And Becky, you were talking about before, it's like, I listen to the 2s and it's like, they just seem like
they seem so
angels.
helpful. Yeah, they're the opposite of me. I'm like, man, they sound so lovely.
But I've also talked to other people that are suspecting that they may be 2s and they're disappointed because like, I don't want to just be the helper. I don't want to, and it's probably because they're just focusing on one little sliver of what that number represents. And So for our conversation, I'd love to look at more that broad spectrum of like, what is it to be a 5? So Mitch, I would love for you to maybe fill in some other aspects of just that holistic type 5 before we get into subtypes. But you guys are welcome to interrupt and ask any other questions. And I'd love to know if anything he says, it's like, yes, that's me. Just be curious.
Yeah. So with 5s, there's lots of different names out there for them, investigator, quiet specialist, those kinds of things. But the true motivation is to understand and make sense of the world. They really want to understand things, understand concepts. And that's how they make sense of this world, is by that information.
Is that kind of the facts?
That is the facts.
We want facts.
Yes. And want to dig in and research that thing, because then it's like, oh, now that makes sense now, that I have that information. And so they focus on conserving energy, minimizing demands on energy and time, building knowledge and understanding, trying to maintain boundaries, and then also not looking foolish. They want to find ways of not looking foolish in front of other people. And then the worldview, kind of the view that their lens that they see the world through, typically is that they see the world as a place that invades their privacy, and believing that they need to protect their resources and energy. So they don't, and 5s can tend to be relatively private, and they're not going to be as forthcoming with information and just, hey, let me just share my life story with you. That's not typically how a 5 engages the world.
You mentioned in there the knowledge and getting knowledge. And one of the things I remember you mentioned to me before is that 5s tend to hoard knowledge. And I remember thinking, I don't hoard knowledge. And you were like, but you only talk to certain people about certain topics. And that's, so like being in the Enneagram, I'm not an expert in this. And so I will share my experience, but I'm very uncomfortable doing it. If we were to talk about, being a dental hygienist, teeth, even that, I probably wouldn't share a whole lot with you in this context because you're not really interested. So I would have to find like that one thing that you're interested. Like, Jori, I didn't know you know politics, so maybe we'll have to grab a coffee and do politics sometime.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's like you find your one person to talk about your topic, and then you can talk and talk and talk and go deep.
But that kind of ends up fitting in that category of like hoarding the information. Because is it just kind of like you're not just freely like, well, let me tell you about that.
Well, it's not knowledge for knowledge. I mean, sometimes you go to a party and people are just like, they're just bring up, politics or sports or whatever, whether you want to talk about that or not, and they force it on you.
Yeah.
Well, 5s are never going to force that on somebody. I heard an illustration. I think this by Ian Cron. He taught when he's talking about one of his best 5 friends. He was talking about that at this guy had passed away, and all of these different circles of people who knew him from different areas of his life all came together at the funeral. And they're like, how did you know him? They're like, oh, we go hunting with him. They're like, I didn't even know he liked hunting. Then there was another group. They're like, yeah, we bike with him. Like, I didn't know he liked biking. It's just like all of these different subset of groups, but think of it as more of like selective knowledge telling, but they're collecting this knowledge, but they're only going to give you relevant knowledge. Like in the workplace, 5s are usually there to work, right? They want to talk about the work related things, typically. And like personal is personal, work is work. It's that separation and boundaries.
Does that ring true for you guys?
Oh, 100%.
Oh, really?
I have and what's funny, I was thinking about this, I have just these sets of friends that do not know each other. Like they're all different, and they all know a different authentic version of me. Like it's like the whole idea of I only have a few people that know the full me, everything. But then each set of these friends, it's like they all essentially would probably feel like they know a different person. But it's all authentic and true to who I am. It's just a different part of what I'm passionate about or my personality.
But it's like that topic or that, this embroidery is how you relate to this person.
Yeah.
And you can talk for a long time about what you've learned and all that kind of stuff with that person.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it, is it that sense of, if Mitch isn't into embroidery, you're like, well, I don't want to bore you with that. I'm perfectly content to just not talk about that with you. Is it that sense of like, I don't want to trouble you?
A little bit. And I think it's like, for me, it's like, I enjoy like that level of passion someone else has. Like one of the first things that attracted me to my husband, Sean, was like just the level of intellect that we can have in conversations around like work or how, like just different things. And so it's like, I want that like passionate, meaningful conversation with someone else. I don't want to just have like a surface level conversation with you about embroidery because you don't care about embroidery. Like I'd rather like find a connection with someone on like, like Becky and I, it's like, we both like politics. Like, let's have like a deep conversation where we're both contributing to that type of thing.
That's interesting. I'm curious, about fives. This has come up several times as far as gray areas versus black and white. How do fives typically view the world?
What would you guys say? Do you view the world more black and white or gray?
I do gray, but I feel like I've also had a lot of counseling, so I don't know where that comes from.
You do view the world as gray?
Gray, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I see a lot of shades of gray.
I would say the same thing, but I want it black and white. So it's like, I feel like maybe some of the grayness comes from lots of counseling and then just that trying to like also bring in, because it's like, I want to understand why people do what they do. And so it's like, I want to research that, but then also realizing like we're imperfect. So there is that gray, but it's like ultimately my brain wants the black and white.
Gotcha.
But it's just not a reality.
Yeah. Okay. I would love to start digging into the subtypes.
Yeah.
And so what Mitch will do is he'll talk through one subtype, and then I'd love to just get your response. And I don't expect you guys to like, I mean, there might be some that you're like, oh, 100%. And there might be some like, I can't relate to that at all. So there's no wrong answer, but I'd love to get that kind of feedback.
Yeah. So I like giving just a simple illustration to kind of like give you a hook for these different subtypes of fives, and then we'll dive into the self-preservation 5 first. And so all of the different fives are concerned about reserving their energy for something. So the self-preservation reserves their energy for more security and comfort, and to make sure and to have these boundaries to make sure that nothing invades that. That's what they are conserving their energy, really for that sense of security and comfort in their life. The social 5 is reserving their energy for intellectual engagement. They love whether that's from an individual that they're having a passionate conversation with, or digging into and diving deep into research, but their energy is stored up for those two things and really almost explodes for those things for the social 5. And then the 1-to-1 5, they reserve their energy, and this is the counter type. So this is the type that doesn't look as much like a 5, but they actually are reserving their energy for a soulmate, for relational intimacy and connection with another person. And they're really trying to channel all that energy towards other people, which you think like that, some of the things we've already talked about, that doesn't, it seems almost counterintuitive with a 5. But we'll get into that more in a little bit.
And you mentioned, so the 1-to-1 is the countertype. Can you remind us what countertype means?
Yeah, countertype is just the one that it doesn't look as much like a standard or the meme version of the 5. And they're almost in a way trying to push back against their the normal quote unquote 5 inclination.
Okay.
And worldview. So they have a mixture of things going on.
Gotcha.
Inside of them.
Cool. Okay. Good reminder. I'll love to ask more questions once we get to the 1-to-1.
Yeah. So the self-preservation 5s are really looking for that ideal castle, that ideal safe place in their life, and they seek understanding, and they aim to be self-sufficient. And they do this a lot by actually withdrawing from others. One author actually says, these are the most 5 5s that are out there. And so here are a couple things you need to know about self-preservation fives is number one, they like boundaries, and they fundamentally believe that they do have this limited time, limited space, limited energy, limited resources, and that they need to allocate those things very sparingly and very wisely. And so they typically have clearly defined boundaries, and they may experience the world and other people and new situations as almost overwhelming. And then they're also very careful to select those that they allow behind the walls. They're not going to let anybody in, but the people that they do let in, they are really trusting of that person. And very few people actually know the feelings that are going on inside of a self-preservation five. So boundaries is the first thing you need to know. The second thing is that they're self-sufficient. They pursue independence and collect resources. They need to be self-sufficient. And then they erect these barriers to actually prevent others from getting too involved in their internal world. And they also struggle with feeling like they owe somebody else. They don't want to have that attachment to other people, because it feels like, oh, that is actually hurting my self-sufficiency, and I would have to let them behind the wall almost if I owe them something. And then the last thing you need to know about self-preservation fives is minimalism. And really what this is they're really fascinated by and eager to understand philosophy and science and religion and all kinds of systems, but at the same time, like it's channeled towards their energy is channeled towards that learning, whereas it's not channeled towards material goods and resources. And they really try to get by on very little resources, very little emotional support, and material things are just really not that important. And sometimes fives are called accidental minimalists because they're not trying to not have a bunch of things, but they just kind of fall into that because having more things means more energy I might have to give to those things.
That's smart. Because that is the way, there's that saying of like, do you own your things or do your things own you? It's like, that's the way things go.
Yeah.
I would say I see that in gift giving, because I'm always like, what is the practical? Like, what are they going to actually use, with our kids? I don't want to pick this up off the floor in 3 months and throw it away. Like, and I think we grew up with different gift giving
strategies,
experiences. And, but yeah, as a five, I'm like, they don't need that thing that is useless in, after an hour of playing with it.
Yeah. Didn't you guys this last Christmas, like that was a gift to your kids? You
going
took
to Mexico.
Them, yeah. Rather than like, we're going to buy a bunch of presents or
experience. Yeah.
So how does that one resonate with you guys? That self-preservation. Were you finished? Sorry.
Yeah, I was.
Okay. How does that one feel?
That's me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The self-sufficiency. I mean, I am independent to a fault. I've gotten better, and I've, again, lots of counseling. And, I think that's where Jesus and the Bible's also helped. And like, we are created for relationship. And, but yeah, all those things ring very true.
I was really proud of Becky the other day. She's taking our daughter to gymnastics, and she's like, I'm going to call another mom that she knows that is taking their daughter, and I'm going to see if she wants to walk around the track and talk while our kids are doing gymnastics. I'm like, good job for reaching out. And that's a big deal. It's like, I'm coming outside the wall there, and I'm willing to let somebody in a little bit more, and, a little bit at a time. So
I can relate to that so much. I'm not a five. But we've talked about this. If we're going to say wings, I might be that 6 with a 5 wing. So a lot of things you're saying, I totally resonate with. Jori, I'm curious, how does the self-pres feel for you?
There's like pieces of it that I'm like, yeah, like I'm not a minimalist at all. Like I'm not. So it's like those pieces, or, like with the like independence, like there's like a level of that, which I think comes more from like unhealth in like my family growing up than it does like actual personality. Cause it's like, I'm okay to ask for help, or like invite people into something. I'm still very selective with who that is.
Yeah.
But like probably more willing to do that than like someone that's like a full self-pres 5. But definitely like the knowledge side with like theology, politics, like that, like those things. It's like, yeah, I can resonate a lot with that, and still having that like very low like level of energy, like just starting with less energy every day. So it's like being careful with my boundaries, like what we say yes to. I'm more than comfortable to say, nope, we're not putting that on our calendar, or not feeling like to me, because it's not personal. It's like, oh, I'm not letting people down. I'm just saying no because that's not good for me and my family. So,
how does it feel when you guys cancel plans?
I love it.
I'm trying to think. We usually have a very good reason. I mean, again, we don't have an overscheduled social calendar, so it's like a kid is sick, or it's not just like we really.
You didn't let your calendar get too full. Yeah, Becky, I'm curious for you. What does it look like to ask for help?
So I'll just give you a little background. Becoming a mom the first time was really what pressed into that. Like, the independence is not serving me well anymore, because I have this little child who is totally dependent on me, and I have to like do everything for them. But also it was really hard. So yeah, that's when counseling started. But now it's a conscious thing. And it can be still, I wrestle with feelings of like I've failed, or I think that's the biggest thing. If I need help, I feel like I failed in whatever it is.
It's almost like because you were supposed to be so self-sufficient and you're recognizing now I'm not. So the very fact that I need someone else to help, it just means I failed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it depends, what the issue is. Little things, obviously, it's no big deal. But if it's, something, I definitely still recognize those feelings of failure that I'm trying to come in there and have to work through that and then ask for help.
I told a story one time at church. Like, I got my car stuck out in a field because I was like taking the kids out on a sled, and it was freezing, sun was setting, and I like went back, got tools, and came back. And the mantra in my head was like, I will not ask for help. It was weird. It was like this thing. It's like, I will not ask for help. Got myself out of it, and I was so proud that I didn't need anyone to help me. And later I talked to a neighbor, and he was like, why didn't you call me? I was like, unless there was no other option out there, I just wasn't going to do it.
I would have called a stranger, a tow truck.
Yeah, it's funny. And I don't know what that is, but I probably need to dig into that a little bit more. Anything else on the self-pres before we move on?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, awesome. Let's hear about the next one.
All right. So the social 5, again, so the self-pres 5, it's like conserving that energy for that security and comfort and to kind of keep people at bay and from intruding. But for the social 5, it's really reserving that energy for intellectual engagement. And they really seek understanding by pursuing unique forms of knowledge. And this isn't like spooky things, right? But this is like, sometimes it's more eccentric or just really kind of out there things that they're interested in. And so a couple things.
Why are you laughing, Becky?
I'm like, embroidery? Is that what it's called?
Well, I don't want to jump the gun.
I said unique and eccentric, not old.
I told Mitch a bunch of random facts about giraffes yesterday.
Well, when was it that we were talking about conspiracy theories and you gave a very compelling argument that Titanic actually didn't sink?
Yeah. A boat sank. It was not the Titanic.
Wow.
So you're saying this and like, don't look at Jori. Don't look at Jori. I'm
over
sorry.
here like, it's me.
Okay. Yeah. That's great. That'll be a secret. We will reveal in just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah. Keep going with social.
Now I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
So a couple things we need to know about social 5s is, number one, this may sound weird, but they collect people who share interests. So they want to be around other people who share the same interests that they do, so that they can almost like intellectually, not spar, but like sharpen each other. And the people that they see as more knowledgeable in that particular area, they can almost idealize or idolize that, like, wow, that person is so smart at that. And they want to bring them into the fold of under them so that they can really learn and glean all of the information from that individual or individuals. And so, their connections to other people are likely more intellectual than emotional. And they seek out interaction with those who share, very similar interests. And what's interesting is the social 5 is probably the most outgoing version of the 5, but they can be incredibly outgoing and excited when sharing interests and ideas and connecting with interesting people about those particular ideas. And that you just like lights up like, oh wow, we can have a good conversation about this interesting thing, subject. So collect people who share interests with them. Another one is pursue ultimate ideals. Enneagram 5s all deal with idealism, and for the social 5, it's really pursuing ideal intellect and intellection, and they see a very clear gap between the ideal world and like this meaning of life that's out there, and then the ordinary world, which is just the everyday life. And I can achieve this if I just research and figure this out. I mean, Jori, is almost like you saying like, yeah, I could do any job because I'll just research it and figure it out. In a lot of ways, that's kind of what this is. There's this thing out there, and like that provides meaning and understanding, which is not my everyday life currently. And they see that gap. And they have a very strong belief in a value system, and they tend to believe that they are actually more advanced intellectually, which may lead them to appear somewhat arrogant to other people because they're like, I obviously know more than you about this. So pursue ultimate ideals, collect people who share interests. And the last thing is they have a big wanting to search for true meaning and what meaning actually is. And they aspire to connect with someone special and powerful that will provide meaning or enrich and clarify their life. And they can be very idealistic of this person or put that person up on a pedestal. And then the thought that there may be no meaning or objective truth is very uncomfortable for a social 5. And this actually may lead them to idolize and oversimplify things at times because they're trying to search for this deeper meaning and truth that's out there.
What do you guys think?
It's me.
Did you read his notes before this episode?
I actually just wrote a biography about myself and gave it to Mitch.
Well, okay, I don't want to jump in. I don't want to jump in too quick. Like, what about that just jumped out? Like, yeah, that's.
I mean, just especially the thing where it's like I want to connect intellectually with people. I mean, I already made that statement of like that's how I like collect my friend groups. And like the thing that I love most about like my husband is like just those deep connections over intellect and conversation is huge. And so I think that, and I mean, that's the biggest one, but yeah, just all of it is like 100%. Yes.
I heard that, but then also you said the idea that something ideal and completely objective, if it's not out there, that is very uncomfortable. And you were talking about like, I see a lot of gray, but I'm trying to find that black and white.
Yes.
That resonated with me. It's like, yeah, that sounds really, really. Yeah. Becky, I'm curious, is there any of that sounds familiar or relatable?
Not really. No, it is interesting how different 5s can be in hearing that.
Well, anything else because so far we're like 1 for 1 or 2 for 2, I should say. 2 for 2. But keep going. Yeah.
So last but not least, we have the 1-to-1 5, and they really reserve their energy for a soulmate. And so this subtype like seeks to understand and to improve their ability to engage with the world by finding a partner who truly gets them. They want to find that person who they they click with and that truly understands them. So a couple things we need to know about the 1 to 1-5. Again, this is the counter type, is that, so whereas the social wants to search for meaning, the 1 to 1-5 wants to search for meaningful connection with other people. And they are incredibly attuned to emotional connections with people, and may experience that clicking with somebody else. And they can feel like this instant and deep bond. That's what they're looking for. However, they are often torn between that need to withdraw from that person and then also need to be engaged with that person. It's this tension inside of them of like, I know I need to be there for this person, but there's also this, I need to pull back a little bit as well. They're typically private and introverted, but highly value relationships and need someone with whom they can share a special connection. They are passionate about finding their soulmate or a soul friend, and trust is that cornerstone of that relationship. And so they want to find that other person very, very badly, and are seeking after that and saving up that energy for it. The second thing is that they're emotionally sensitive, which is not said about the other 5s. They're emotionally sensitive and in touch with their desires, and tend to feel pain and other strong emotions very easily. And they're likely to be very creative and artistic, with a rich inner life, and actually have a deep romantic streak about them. And they are probably expressing their intense passion and emotion through their work and through other art or whatever they find as their primary creative pursuit. And then the last thing is that they desire unconditional love and connection. In finding the soulmate, the thing they idolize is this relational connection with this other person, and they want this person to fully, unconditionally accept them and have this love and this bond and this trust that no matter what happens, we are in this together, and you're never going to leave me. We're going to actually get through this together. So those are the 3 things to know.
I'm just curious, and maybe this isn't true for the 5, but I feel like when you've talked about counter types with other numbers that we've talked about so far, that it's like sometimes they can be confused with this number. Is there, 1 to 1-5 that can look like another number?
So yeah, I mean, 1 to 1-5s they're sometimes can confuse themselves with being 4s. Because there's a lot of emotion. They have a lot of emotional intensity, but they're very quiet about that emotional intensity. And so sometimes they can be confused with the 4. But it's really such a different motivation in the end of the day. And that's where I think for the counter type, it's this tension of, and almost like this balance of intellect and heart that are coming together, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, let's talk about stacking. That's the term, right?
Yeah.
When usually there's 1 or 2 of those subtypes that we can relate to a little bit more, and then usually one that can you describe a little bit better than I just did?
Yeah, I mean, so stacking is we have a dominant subtype or instinct that we use to show up in the world, that we use as like our survival mechanism. So self-pres, social, 1-to-1. And then there's typically one other one that we can see, I also kind of relate to that. And we may use that instinct to actually help us survive here and there and through the world. And then there's probably one that you're like, I don't relate to that at all. And it's more underdeveloped in who we are. So, I would like to add though, too, with that, with the 1-to-1-5, did either of you, was there anything that you resonated with the 1-to-1-5?
I feel like there was, but I'm having a hard time pinpointing exactly what it was, because so much of, you're talking about they're looking for their soulmate. And so I'm thinking marital relationship. But I'm like, what can that look like outside?
Can it also extend to like just deep friendships?
Yeah. Well, it definitely extends. It's not just, it's like, or soul friendship in some ways is, this like unconditional connection where you are truly willing to share everything with that person.
Because I almost, as you were describing them, I almost feel like that felt more familiar to me than the social. But I feel like I need to research it a little bit more.
We're doing that live, in real time. So is it true that someone that is more of a one-to-one, maybe my guess would be maybe they don't have a ton of friends, but maybe they might have a few friends that are very, very deep friendships.
Yeah. And again, this is probably one of the only one-to-ones out of all of the different Enneagram numbers that is probably more on the introverted side than the extroverted side. The expression level of the intensity is much lower for the 1-to-1 5 than probably any other Enneagram number. Whereas like the social 5 is probably, if any of 5 is going to be extroverted, it's going to be the social 5.
Gotcha.
And the more outgoing. But it's still very much more reserved, still private, and they're saving that, again, that energy to let that person or those couple of people in and to have a deeper relational connection with them.
So Jori, I'm curious what your thoughts on about the 1-to-1.
Yeah, I wouldn't really say that there's like much that I resonate with. Like, it's like I automatically go to like my marriage, but it's like that's still driven more by like a deep intellect that then the emotion follows rather than it being like emotionally driven. So yeah, I don't feel like there's much in the 1-to-1 that.
So would you say, like, if you were to stack them, you'd probably say social, self-pres, 1-to-1?
Yeah.
And Becky, probably
it might be the self-pres 1-to-1 social, but
yeah. Well, we'll have her back on in 6 weeks, and we'll have an answer.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that because I'd love to talk about growth and from what you've already shared in this conversation, but also just from what I know a little bit about you guys. You guys have done a lot of work, either in counseling or specifically with the Enneagram. It's like I imagine it's like I want to do some research on this and figure out. I would just like to know what has been helpful to move you to a healthier place. And you can answer that either directly through the lens of the Enneagram or just because you identify as a type 5. It could be like anything. What has helped you bring more health into your life?
I'm a slow thinker, so I'll have a great answer tomorrow. Obviously, counseling has done a lot, and I think of like some moments that I've really pressed into some of those uncomfortable situations, but it's been growth. But I think just knowing what my tendencies are, that 5s really want to be independent, and having that awareness and that language helps me. Like the other day going a walk, like, okay, my default is to just be alone and take a walk, but I will text this person who I know will be there and see if she wants to walk too. So yeah, just obviously as you get to know yourself better and know your weaknesses, you can then consciously make decisions, healthy decisions.
Let me ask you, okay, so the tension of reaching out to that, other mom to say, you want to go for a walk, is it having anything to do with the possibility of rejection?
No, it's that I'm totally happy being alone on a walk.
Okay.
And taking that time to try to invest and build another relationship and get to know someone. In some cases, I feel like maybe it's for them. Maybe sometimes it's for me, but yeah, I'm totally happy just doing it by myself.
So I'm curious, is there anything specific, any practice or any mantra or anything like that helps you ask for help? You're talking about like, I'm wanting to be independent, I'm wanting to be self-sufficient. What helps you, reach out?
Usually it's when I hit a wall in some way or another. Yeah, when I had my 2 younger kids, it was, crying in the shower every night. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so horrible.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I need some help. Yeah, usually it's hitting a wall because I'm not going to maybe ask for help if things are going well. So it's just when those problems come, challenges that again, like, if my car was stuck in a field, I would call a tow truck. You know what? Maybe it would be like, okay, but maybe there is someone who, like a 2 that I might know, who would love to come out and help me.
There's a lot of numbers that would just jump at the chance to help.
So it is just taking that moment of like, okay, I could call someone anonymous, I could do this, but who might find joy in helping? But it is that humbling.
So I'm curious, along this line of thought, and both of you guys can answer this, and then I want to hear what you'd have to answer. But okay, if you know a 5, or you're married to a 5, or your best friend's a 5, what are good ways to offer help? Is that ever an issue? Like you have a difficult time accepting help? Like, what's the best way for someone to say, hey, I see this new mom that has got to be having a hard time. Why? Because every kid is difficult. What's the best way to offer help?
I would say asserting in, like, saying, hey, how can I help you? I know this is a hard time. I'm going to do something. What would be the most helpful? But not like, is there something I can do to help? Because I'd be like, no, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But if they're like, okay, I'm going to do something, maybe throw some suggestions out there, but, I'm doing something. But at the same time, if they don't give me that option, if someone just comes over and does something, then it's probably not appreciated.
That's violating a boundary.
Yeah.
Versus, even if it's asserting this, it probably also depends on who that individual is.
It can, for the situation. But like, Mitch is really good when I'm like, I need to go to the store and get these things. And he's like, I'll go to the store. I'm like, oh, I love you. That's awesome. But I wouldn't ask him to go to the store or expect him to.
Yeah. So if you see someone who's a 5 that you suspect is a 5 and you want to help them, it's probably not like, oh, I'm just going to kick the door down and help them and I'm going to save the day. Probably not the best.
Yeah.
No.
Don't do that?
No.
Okay.
We don't like surprises.
Yeah.
Definitely don't like surprises. I would say like very similar to what Becky said. Like not asking, like, can I do that for you? Like, I mean, same thing with my husband, Sean. Like if I like express out loud that something needs to be done, he goes, all right, I'll do that. Rather than saying, would you like me to do that? Because of course I'm going to be like, well, no, I'll just take care of that. And then like one of the other things, and I think it's like depending on who the people are, because it's like, yes, I don't want people just randomly doing things for me, because then I feel like I owe them something. I don't like that either. But so like after I had my girls, like my mother-in-law, she would be like, what can I do to help around the house? And of course I was like, nothing, as I'm like postpartum, holding a baby, crying, all the things. I'm like, nothing, everything's fine. So then the second time around, I like gave her a list of things where I was like, if you come do these things, that's helpful. Like make sure there's a meal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day. That type of thing where it's like, you're not taking the mental load, or you're not asking for mental load from me to tell you what I need, but you're also not intruding on things that I don't want you to do. It's like the safe list of, but yeah, I think that's the big thing is like when you ask a 5, like, what can I do to help you? It is taking a mental load on us and like that mental capacity that it's like even figure it out where it's like nothing, don't do anything. So it's almost like you need people that are close to you, which we don't always let them close to us, to pick up on the social cues of what we're dropping that we need taken care of. It can be tricky.
Jori, I'm curious. Are you familiar with the 5 love languages?
Yes.
The book and all that. What would you say your love language is?
Words of affirmation.
Okay.
But they have to be specific and meaningful.
Okay.
So like we've had the conversation, like I don't like, oh, you're a good mom. Like specifically, what did I do? Or it's like I still, and I think that goes back to like that wanting to be recognized for like an intellect or something that I'm good at, or like I brought something to a situation. So it's like, I want to be recognized for that. I don't want just like good job. Like not that kind of affirmation, but
Yeah. I was just curious because, and I wonder if this is a social and self-pres thing, but I mean, for Becky, it is definitely acts of service without being asked. It's like, hey, if the floor is swept and the dishes are done and the carpet's vacuumed and all that kind of thing, like that speaks way more than words of affirmation for her. But I wonder if it's that difference between some self-pres versus social, and then you add in the types and stuff. Anyway, that's a tangent, but I thought that's interesting.
Yeah, well, I'd be curious how much that we're talking 5s, but along those lines of all the types, I wonder if there's some similarities.
Yeah.
All self-pres, I wonder if it's like they appreciate, I don't know.
I'm like one-to-ones. I'm like, is it physical touch or, like quality time, or those kinds of things more important. Anyway, that's a whole side note.
So Mitch, what would you add or what would you want to suggest to Jori and Becky today? Or this is your opportunity to tell your wife, like, this is what I think you should do.
Becky, let me tell you all the things. I've been waiting for this moment.
Oh gosh, I need another counseling appointment.
Jori, can you go pop some popcorn?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. But the self-preservation is something that could be helpful is to really examine the tendency to withdraw, and what's the fear behind the needing to withdraw and to go away, and that some of the growth path is what does not getting rid of boundaries or bulldozing the wall and the castle, but what does it look like to relax that a bit or let down the drawbridge? It doesn't have to be all the way, but how do you like let some air in, and so it's like that's the examining that. What does it look like to relax boundaries, not fully, but to relax it a little bit and then examine tendency to withdraw for the self-pres. For the social, it's more finding the balance between focusing on knowledge and increasing emotional connection with others and being fully present with the imperfect here and now and not trying to idolize this future knowledge that I can go out and learn, but really appreciating what you have learned and then finding avenues to share that knowledge with the world. Because 5s have this incredible capacity to retain that knowledge, but then finding those avenues to bless other people with it. So for the social, and then for the one-to-one, it's becoming curious about those close to you and recognizing that your high relational standards that make it almost impossible for others to live up to. They have this high idealized vision of what they want the people that are closest to them in their life to be. And sometimes that can be a high standard to live up to. And so to begin recognizing that, and why do I have that such a high standard? So those are just a couple of things.
That's great. Well, believe it or not, we're actually coming up close on time. I feel like this episode flew by. Maybe not for you guys. I don't know. So I have a question for you, both of you. And then I would love maybe a last thought to anyone listening that may be wrestling with the 5. Like, what do 5s need to hear? But my question to you guys would be, you both follow Jesus and your faith has been helpful to you. What is it about the gospel, or what is it about Jesus? What is it that's true about him that you find really, really helpful to you with your personality?
So I would say for me, like, one of the things that like just continually brings me back to like my faith in Jesus, which this is going to probably be the most 5 sounding thing in relation to faith, is I just feel like Jesus is someone that we just can't fully comprehend. And so it's like this never ending well of like knowledge that I can go down to try to like understand more. And like that's exciting because it's like there's other things that's like you can get to the end and it's like, oh, well, I've learned everything I can about this topic. And so just that like mystery with like Jesus and faith is like very intriguing and has continually been something that's like brought me back where it's like, you know, I don't want to just believe something because someone said it from stage or I grew up with that or my parents said that. It's like, no, I want to go deep and like believe this for myself and learn about this myself and continue. Like it's not like we've never reached that point. And then I would say just like, which is like the other side of being a 5, just this idea of like Jesus knows me so intimately and so personally, like no one else. And knowing that it's like through all of my imperfections or like how I don't meet up to like different standards or we say like different numbers are idolized and maybe 5s aren't in our society. It's like, one, Jesus made me the way that I am. So he loves me just as the 5 that I am. And he loves me in all my imperfections and no matter what. And so it's like there's, instead of like that being a fearful thing, like there's like a security in that.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, just something that's like really special about just knowing like how deeply he cares and like knowing like what we need. Like I feel like I'm someone like wanting that more like fact over like feelings and stuff. It's like I feel like Jesus has given like really practical experiences in my life for me to be like, no, my faith's real. Like I've literally seen you show up in a way that like you can't explain with anything else, which is like something that it's like I think Jesus meets all of us like exactly where we need him to be like, oh yeah, he's real. Like what he's doing in my life like can't be explained by anything else.
That's cool. So it's like you find comfort in some of that unknown. Like I can't, find all the answers. And like Jesus. I think it's really interesting that one of the phrases that you gave to the social 5 was, they're reserving an energy for intellectual engagement with people. And one of the things you said is like, I love how Jesus, it's almost like you can engage with Jesus intellectually and there's no end. So I just love the idea of like, you're like, man, I love being able to research Jesus and study Jesus, and it's like this intellectual partner that you can.
And I feel like making my prayer life like that has almost like deepened my level of relationship with Jesus because it's like I have a very like intimate, deep prayer life where it does feel like I'm making that like intellectual connection with him almost, if that makes sense. Like using that as a way like through conversation to like deepen my faith.
Well, I mean, there's stories of Jesus when he's like, I want the children, like, let the children come. It's like, this is very, very simple, very approachable. And yet he was also completely confounding people left and right. He would say something, they'd be like, what does that mean? I don't understand. He was deep at the same time that he had that simplicity and approachability. That's really, really cool. Yeah. Becky, I'd be curious, what's helpful about the gospel in your journey?
So I think to say what's helpful, I have to say what was almost unhelpful in that, obviously we're broken humans and we tend to heap shame on ourselves easily. And I think one of the things with a 5, just knowing that I'm not as relational and, Jesus was so relational. And so there was a lot of kind of wrestling with myself of like, I'm a believer and yet, relationships are hard. And we're supposed to love one another. And that's really hard. I just want to retreat. And I think, really understanding myself more of like what Jori said, like Jesus made me this way, the good, the bad, all of it. It's like a package that he made. And leaning into him to come out of my shell a little bit more, do some of those, like contact people to take a walk. It really gives me the, like, Jesus loves me. I have the strength to do this. He is my strength. I can, show that to other people. There's so much more I could say, but I think that's kind of the...
Well, it's almost like you're saying like where I might be lacking in this energy and this bandwidth, that's when I'm really going to lean on Jesus to love people well, like through me, or I guess loving through Jesus. That's what I'm hearing you say.
And still compared to like a 2, it probably looks like nothing. But for a 5, I'm like, I'm baby steps.
Well, it's like, I feel like it's so, again, it's just such our culture to say, man, the people that have tons of energy, that have tons of friendships, tons of relationships, they've got to be better. right? And I don't know that Jesus, that equates of like, yeah, right. I think that it's like, yes, I'm going to be able to use those giftings and those personality types, and it's going to be amazing. But I also need people that are going to be those deeper wells that when they do relate and they do connect with people, it's going to be at a much deeper level than just the surface. You know, you guys will have more to offer those people than other types on the Enneagram. That's what I think of.
I mean, I was going to say very similar things to it. I mean, it's that allowing Jesus to be your energy source for you and really leaning into the Holy Spirit to propel you and to maybe to engage with people in new ways that you may not have ever thought that you could, because your gift of knowledge and deep understanding is truly that. It is a gift. And don't just hoard that all to yourself. Find those outlets and allow God to lead you to, like, how can I share? One thing I'll say about Becky is every morning she has this Bible app thing that she listens to, and she just listens through the entire Bible every year.
Every day? Oh.
Well, I mean, yeah, every day.
It's very impressive.
Bible. She's
20 times speed.
Yeah, 20 times speed, yeah. And she never sleeps. Okay. So, but it's one of those things, is like she wants to continually fill her mind and hear these different things that she has, you know, and keep them there. But it's like, okay, but how are we continuing to like take that nugget and synthesize it down to like, hey, here's something I can share with somebody else. And so finding those outlets where you can share that knowledge and that wisdom that you've gained.
Okay. So I'm curious, because you've been to Kenya before, right? And we're about to go on a trip in 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
I know.
I've got work to do.
Yeah,
anyway, we're going in a couple weeks. You've been there before, and everything I've heard about going to Kenya is there's very little personal space and lots of demand, and we're just always on. And yet you're going back. Have you been? You've been multiple times.
I've been to Kenya and Ethiopia.
Okay. So where does that energy come from in those scenarios?
So I'm not being asked of my children to make them snacks, to take them to the pool, to take them on walks. Who can they play with? All those things. So my demands are very different. I go over there knowing, I kind of joke sometimes, it's kind of like a mommy vacation. Food is all done for us. If we need laundry, we just put it in a bag. You know, but then in those in between hours that we're out, it's amazing. And the relationship with the kids. And that is something that's really, helped me understand some of that relational aspect, because Africa in general is just so much more relational than we are here. And there's like people over process. And so that helps open my eyes too. And
You do find a lot of value in that giving back piece.
Yeah.
Well, Mitch, I'm curious, any kind of final thoughts on someone listening that maybe in some ways you had a similar experience to you guys, as far as like, oh no, I'm a 5. I wish I was something else. That's not really what you said, but what is something that 5s need to hear?
I mean, it is that thirst for knowledge and understanding is a truly remarkable gift. I mean, you bring a level of expertise to any organization that would not be there were you not there. Yeah. And I think that is such a valuable asset to tap into and to realize, wow, we have 5s on our staff, and I'm married to a 5. Like there's these huge wells of wisdom, really, and seeing things from a very different perspective. And so, it's make sure if you have a 5 in your life, ask them questions, be curious about what they're learning. I joke, and again, big on Becky just because I, married to her, but it's one of those things. It's like, hey, she likes to scour the news and news feeds and all this stuff, and I do not. And so every once in a while I'll be like, hey, tell me the top 3 things I need to know from
in the world.
News, in the world. And then she tells me, I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
It's amazing that she has time to research that, considering she listens to the Bible every day. The entire Bible.
She's a very talented woman.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 5s are very smart.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah. No, but I think it is recognizing that they bring that strong level of expertise to it, but then also, and also like a strength in boundaries, which I think a lot of other numbers actually struggle with. Mm-hmm. They struggle with allowing a lot in that they shouldn't. And so this like level of having boundaries is actually really a strength as well.
Yeah.
To add.
Mm-hmm. Very, very good. Well, ladies, thanks so much for sharing about your stories. A lot of really good insight. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
and I'm sure it was a blast, and you just want to be back again and again.
It was great.
Maybe that's the differences in the subtypes.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But Mitch, thanks again, as always, for bringing that not just insight, not just information, but also like, okay, what do we do with this? I think a lot of studying the Enneagram is like, okay, so now I know, so what? And I appreciate that you keep bringing, it's like, well, this is so what? So we can learn more about ourselves, but also what can we apply to grow deeper in our faith, closer to Jesus, but also be the best version of ourselves. So thanks again.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Make sure you keep tuning in. If you found something to be helpful today, make sure you share it. Send it to those people that maybe you suspect. Don't try to shame people or label people. It's like, you're a 5, you need to listen to this. This is going to change your life. But please, the people in your life that you do care about and you think maybe they can benefit from it, make sure you share it, post it on social media, all the good things to spread the word. Thanks so much for watching, and we will pick it up next time with Enneagram Type 6s.